So I thought what would be fun today would to talk to you a little bit about one of the weirdest gigs I ever did. Um, and this was a time that I was in a band at the time, and we actually did a gig in a lifers prison, which basically meant people that were in prison for life, murderers and the like. Now I was very young to be doing this. I think 18, 19 years old probably. Um, and it was via our drummer, who knew someone within the circuit, and I don't mean necessarily a criminal, but it ended up that we were going to do a gig in the prison for these guys. And of course, you're young, you're like, that's cool. Isn't that what Johnny Cash did and all these other people? This is a sure sign we're going to make it. Any road. To put some context into this, we were all booked to do this gig at a certain point, already rehearsed, ready to go, and then it got cancelled at the last minute because they had a riot and things got pretty bad. So it ended up being delayed, I believe, by a couple of months. And eventually the time comes round and we go to this prison. And I have to tell you, being young and obnoxious, I had my opinions on certain things, and some of them haven't changed, and some of them have gone full circle. But at this particular period of time in my life, I had certain ideas about what it would be like in prison. Okay. And so I remember distinctly, we drew up at the gates, and obviously we had to wait and make sure everything was being processed and our van was being searched and everything was being checked up upon. And we went through the first lot of gates, and then the gates came down, and then another gate was there, and then we did the same thing again, and then another gate went up, and we went through these different layers, were like portcullises within if that's the right word, within castles, until eventually we came into the prison proper. I can still see that. I can still see it vividly to this day. Um, this incredibly immaculate grass, like the lines defined around the edges of the grass. It was so pristine. And the sun was coming out, and just beyond them, you could see these huge walls with spiky bits at the top. And my mind's putting barbed wire there, but I don't know if that's just imaginary. And as the last gate came down behind me, thinking to myself, my fucking word, mate, like, no matter what I think about how people are treated in prison, and at that time I probably thought it was a little lenient, my thought was, holy shit, they're not getting out of here. It doesn't matter how pristine the grass is, it doesn't matter how clean everything looks, like there's no rubbish. It actually looks a lot nicer and cleaner than it does outside the gates, but fuck, they're never coming out. It was also at that moment where I realised if it all went horribly wrong, it was going to be pretty hard for me to get out. And so all of a sudden, my cockiness started to dissipate a little bit. Anyway, bit by bit, we were taken around different areas until eventually we went to the canteen. I believe, is it called a mess hall or something? Or is that army? I don't know. But we were taken into where we were doing it, which was in this canteen area. And there was chairs laid out and a kind of makeshift stage at the front. And we set up our gear. We didn't really have time to do a sound check because you had to be in on the dot and out on the dot. So we were in, get ourselves set up. Now, brought bottles of water and whatnot. It was a warm day. Instantly told, no, 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 you can't have anything like that because it presents a security threat. Now, I was a rock singer, a lot of screaming, a lot of gravel, a lot of power. Not the greatest technique in the world going on in them days, as you can imagine. And the more excitable you get, the worse that becomes. So not having any water was not good news for me in that situation. But I had no choice. I had to hand it over. But anyway, next thing we know, in come the people, men. I didn't, I've not got terrible eyes, but I'm a little short-sighted, so mostly I could make out kind of faces, but not really. But as they started to come in at the front, the stereotypical ideas of what you think you might find in a place like this began to sort of materialise. You know, scars on their faces, bald heads, shaved, brutal looking guys. Some guys with bruising. Some guys that didn't look like, you know, they'd have the best day. And they all sat down and we prepared to play. Now, what was amazing, and I still can't believe we did this, was that we had pre-decided on what song to open with. And it seemed like a really smart, edgy thing way back in our rehearsal room where we were drinking a nice lager and thinking that we were the Doors, right? But somehow, in that moment, we all looked at each other and convinced ourselves that we should go with the plan. And the plan was, ladies and gentlemen, Jailhouse Rock. So we did. We played Jailhouse Rock. Um, and they loved it. I don't know if it was the fact that we had the balls to do it, the fact that it was kind of cheeky. I don't know, but these guys really liked it. They really loved it. They whooped, they cheered, they did their thing. And from that moment, we were buds. We were all gonna. It was all gonna be all right. So we played a few songs, and again, it got hotter and hotter. You know, you're talking about 100 men in there, and it got hot. And every now and then, you'd eye the place and look around. You'd see a guard over here, a guard over here, a guard over here, and you'd sort of think, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? About halfway through the gig, eventually, I'm out of fluid, and I'm struggling. And I'm struggling to a point where it's becoming really noticeable to the guys. And as one of the songs finished, one of them has said, "You need a drink, mate." And I'm like, "I've got no water. I'm not allowed to drink." You know. And from that moment, the guys, the crowd started to get a bit umpy about it, right? They start stamping their feet. Get him a drink! Get him a drink! And they're all like, the guards are like, oh, fuck. And they're like, get him a drink! Get him a drink! He needs a drink! The boy needs a drink! Eventually, they capitulate and they brought out like the big metal canister, about 3 guys carrying this thing with a tap on it and a cup. And I was allowed to do that, drink, do that, and drink. And then they took it off again. And they were being booed and ridiculed the entire time. So we finished the gig. The guys absolutely were amazing. But then the strangest thing happened, which we're not expecting. They were allowed to come and sort of approach us. So some of the guys came up. Like, there were guys literally with one eye, you know, but they were also appreciative that we had gone and done this for them, that we were talking to them. And then in the end, they were like, we're actually in a prison band. Can we play something? And we're like, sure. I mean, what are we going to do? We're 18, 19 years old, skinny as my finger. So a few of them came up, picked up a guitar, whatever, and they started they sang a song. They were allowed, the wardens told them they can do one song, and they did a song that they'd written themselves. And I sort of sat there feeling like, what an incredibly poignant moment where they were basically talking about looking out of a window and realising they were never going to get out of prison, a bit like how I was feeling when I first came in. And they played their song, remarkably little amount of reaction from their colleagues, but I was amazed. And they did their song. They thanked us for allowing them to play a song, and from there we packed up and we left. But that has stuck with me my entire life for reasons which are probably obvious, and it's one of those moments where you're really confused as to how you ended up in that situation, but at the same time incredibly grateful that you did, because you have something which very few people have been able to experience in their lives. And I don't know, I just thought I would share that with you today. If any of you guys have got any funny stories like that, any strange gigs that you've done. We've all done bad gigs, some more bad gigs than good gigs, to be honest with you. But that one's always stuck with me. As I say, I can still see the prison. I can still see the crowd. Not distinctly, but I can see him and feel it and see the guards, and how strange the entire situation was, and how it made me realise that no matter how sanitary it seems within a prison, it's still prison.